Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. At The Reason We Learn, we aspire to be part of the solution. The purpose of this show is to take a good, honest, potentially painful look at the way kids are being educated. We know we can do better, and this is where we'll talk about how. Let's learn something. Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I am your host, Deb Philman. I'm so glad you're joining us today for this very important show. As you know, if you've already subscribed to the channel, this is where we discuss all things related to education and how we can make it better. If you're not already subscribed, I would ask you to please do so down below and hit the notification bell to be notified when I make new content. Please also like and share this broadcast so we can get as many people joining us live in the chat to ask questions or comment. While we're here, if you're watching on the replay, thank you for joining us. Please share this out to all who would be interested. Each of these shows is an opportunity for all of us to hear from people who are working to improve education in America any way they can, and this one is no exception. Freedom of expression on college campuses has been under assault across America for years. And at Cornell University, the problem was particularly bad. So a group of alumni decided they'd had enough. Through hard work and dedication, they persuaded the president to launch a university-wide free expression initiative. So today I have with me Cornell alum Paul Rossi, who you might be familiar with from other channels, but also from this channel, and Cornell professor Randy Wayne. They are joining me to discuss how this Freedom of Expression initiative is working out because we are approaching the 1-year anniversary of its implementation. Paul Rossi is an active high school math teacher and the co-founder and CEO of Terra Firma Teaching Alliance, a peer support and placement network of traditional K-12 teachers. Randy Wayne is an associate professor at Cornell University. He is a biophysical plant cell biologist in the Laboratory of Natural Philosophy who researches the nature of light. He teaches plant cell biology, light and video microscopy, and a non-majors course called Light and Life. This all sounds very fascinating, by the way. He is the author of Plant Cell Biology from Astronomy to Zoology and Light and Video Microscopy. He is co-chair of the Heterodox Academy Campus Community at Cornell University, which brings heterodox thinkers to campus. He's a recipient of Steamboat Institute's 2023 Courage in Education Award for being a tireless advocate for free speech and intellectual diversity. And I am so thrilled and honored to have them both with me today. So please join me in welcoming my two guests to the stage. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming. This is a subject near and dear to my heart, as Paul knows, because he's worked with me before, and I think also to our audience. So thank you for joining. Briefly, and I don't know which of you wants to go first, if you could enlighten us about the problem at Cornell as was, and then we can lead into like how this all came about, the new policy and what works well on campus policies versus things like heterodox. So let's, we'll get all into all of it, but if you could give us background info, that would be great. Whoever wants to go first.
Okay, free speech is a problem on campus. And the biggest problem with free speech is self-censorship, that people are so afraid to speak. And that probably describes 70 to 80% of the people on campus. It never was like that. And maybe Paul can say what it was like when he was here as a student.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while. I have to say I graduated in 1992, and based on my experience then, I was a big leftist at the time. Since then I've moved, but to the center. But I would say, at the time, there was I felt like kind of we were in the minority in the sense of, when I say we, I mean the politically correct subculture into which I belonged. And, I remember, there were the jocks, there were the popular kids. It was sort of like high school translated into the undergraduate world. And Cornell is a big university. There, they have, I think, 10,000 undergrads or something like that. So it was a much different place. Like, we were sort of in the cutting edge of postmodernism and deconstruction in the humanities and all these very interesting things that we were cooking up. But, you know, I had no idea that it was going to turn into what it turned into and metastasize into the global culture the way it did. So my experiences then, you know, we had, there was much more balance of opinion in classrooms. So, you know, there was no leftist, or there was a leftist orthodoxy in some of the humanities classes, I would say, but generally across the campus did not get the sense that political correctness, as it was known at the time, was dominating. Since then, you know, I'm sure, Randy, you can speak more about what happened. And, you know, we would have controversial speakers. At the time, I remember Ann Coulter was the head of the Cornell Daily, or she was running a newspaper at the time. And so there were, she was running the Cornell Review, I think it was.
Yes.
There was a broad spectrum. At the same time, we had the Young Spartacus with the communist paper, you know, so there was a broad spectrum of ideas. There were sit-ins, there were shutdowns around apartheid, I remember. And so we had some of that culture, that cancel culture, or at the time, I wouldn't call it cancel culture because they didn't really have the power to cancel anyone. But shouting down speakers was starting to happen then. But there was a robust cadre, or there was a robust culture of free expression, I remember being generally on campus at the time. Of course, I was against it. You know, I was probably among the crowd of people shouting down, you know, some speakers at some point. But you know, since then, what I've heard from my former students is that it's radically changed.
Would you do me a favor and shut off Paul's mic while I speak? Because I'm really afraid of being shouted down.
Paul will mute himself in defense of free speech. No, I'm kidding.
So, I was completely unaware of the postmodernist culture that was developing. As a matter of fact, I really became aware of it looking back and seeing Jonathan Rauch's book, Kindly Inquisitors, and Gad Saad's book on the parasitic mind, how in the social science of humanities this existed. And I was only aware of things like, you know, you can't wear a sombrero, or when Margaret Cho came, there was the chop suey font in her poster. And it just seemed like these silly uprisings, and completely isolated and not connected to any ideology, just infantile, frankly, ignorant and infantile. And but then after George Floyd was killed, things went crazy here. Actually, let me say before that, there were a lot of people that were brought into Cornell that were apparent victims. They saw themselves as victims, and they were kind of told they were they were really told they were victims. And then they come to me as their advisor. And most of my advisees want to become physicians, or that's how it used to be. And I'd say, what do you want to do when you get out of this joint? And they'd say, I don't know. And I'd say, you want to be a ditch digger? And they say, no. So I say, you give it a little thought. And then they say they want to be a physician. And I say, you know, you're not unusual in then that you don't want to say that. Because if you tell your family or your friends you want to become a physician, that's the end of the conversation. But if you tell them you want to be a ditch digger, they're interested. They want to know why. So they have no practice in understanding what it takes to become a physician. So we talk about that first, and then we talk about what kind of courses would they think they should take in order to become the person they want to become when they get out of here. And they say to me, how come nobody talks to us like this? And I say, want to know why? All you have to do is get a couple friends and say, there's this white heterosexual male up there that's telling me I'm in charge of my life and I can arrange my own curriculum. And you should fire that guy. And all I just say is, let him try it. So before all the postmodern and political correctness, there was a victim culture. There wasn't the victim Olympics. Nobody was vying to be the best victim. As a matter of fact, as soon as they had the opportunity to not think of themselves as a victim, they jumped on it. But then after 2020, we had the whole victim mentality, and everything was divided into oppressor and oppressed, and only the oppressed could speak, apparently, and the oppressors couldn't, and I just never paid attention to that.
Well, do you have a theory, and this is for either of you, do you have a theory as to where that kind of passive victim mentality might have come from? Because to be activated all at once across so many campuses, not just Cornell, this isn't the first I've heard of it, of course, but for so many young people, especially young people who are, and I hate using this word, but let's face it, privileged enough to attend a university like Cornell. Okay, that's that, they earned their way there, but it's still something that only a select number of qualified applicants get to do. That they would still see themselves as victims. Do you have a theory on where that worldview comes from, as far as in their upbringing? Because by the time you get to college, you've spent 13 years in school and being parented and everything else. I mean, any theories on how they arrived there with ripe for that?
My own view is that it's the capture of education in K-12 by radicalized teachers that went through ed schools and were schooled in a certain way of presenting American history in particular, and also around their own identities as oppressed. And so, if you see the history of America as a series of the extension of rights granted by the government, and you see the petition of grievances being extended to groups that have been left out, which is largely which is part of the story, right? But if that is the only story, and you leave out things like freedom and the Constitution and things like that, or those are sort of seen as secondary, then, or even at worst, a fig leaf, right? Those things are actually hide the history of oppression in this country. Well, then you are ripe for that by the time you enter as a freshman.
Yeah, and I also wonder about the self-esteem movement, the idea that, you teach a kid, we can't use red pen anymore, marking up the papers, and, well, everybody's getting a trophy and these kinds of things. I think the two maybe combined to make people a little more fragile. But the reason I ask is that I'm hearing from university professors who are not, like in the sciences, in math, in subjects that have nothing to do with education or even the humanities or social sciences. And they're saying, what is it with these students? Especially if you've been a professor for any length of time, like suddenly, like you said, since 2020, my students are, things are different. And I feel like if I picture it in my head, there's sort of like a funnel that goes from the ed school down to K-12, produces the students that come back up into the college. It's like a little churn. And the thing is, now that they're there in the subject areas that are not education or even social science, they're coming in there's like a threat of capture, where if they get their way and get everybody to silence themselves, bad things are going to happen in terms of what we know anymore as a country, as a culture. So do you think my theory has any merit, that this is the direction that it's going, like this?
Absolutely. And recently I got a chance to look at the next generation science standards. And I was amazed to see that, as my brother is amazed to hear what's going on in colleges now compared to when he was in college, particularly after October 7th. And so the next generation college standards, to me, next generation science standards, to me, look like combining Leave No Child Behind and Common Core. You end up with finding the least common denominator for the standards. So people really are uneducated when they come to Cornell, and they are. That's why I started looking. I could see that my students aren't as good as they used to be. don't know how to think, nor do they want to know how to think. They just want to know what to think. If I tell them this shirt is red and I give them a test and ask them a question, what color is my shirt? 95% will say red. It doesn't matter what's the truth. It's all test points. And so I think the next generation standards have really dumbed students down. And then on top of that, they've not taught them how to think, how science is used to look at evidence and use reason and analysis to put things together. They just know the punchline. For example, humans cause climate change. And so they come out as activists and uneducated. And that's what I see.
Now, getting back to the Cornell situation with the speech and self-censorship, I gather that when students are self-censoring, they're afraid to say something, that means that those who take the approach that you just described, sure, your shirt's red, I'm not asking any questions, that will dominate. So even if, let's say, you have 30 students in a classroom, and let's say 25 of them would say that your shirt is white with blue, whatever, but they get the sense that the other 5 wouldn't, that they'll just follow along, or are they following your lead? Like, who's setting the tone? Is it the students that are making them feel like they got to self-censor, or the professors, or a mixture of both?
Okay, so I have a lot of advisees that tell me what's going on around campus.
Okay.
In my class, the first thing I tell them is don't believe a single word I say. I'm going to give you personal experience doing experiments and reading original texts that you can come up with your own decisions, and different people can come up with different answers that are correct answers on a test, as long as you can argue for them. Turns out that I was sort of joking when I said this, but it really made a difference to them to realize that I wanted them to think. I didn't want them just to spit something back. And last year I had the wokest of my woke students. And the second assignment I gave, he said, I'm not doing this because you didn't mention any women in this particular lecture except Franz Boas's daughter. And so I'm going to write about how Native peoples use dyes. Gave him 100%. And I said, by the way, I didn't cover that because I'm covering that in lecture 19, but all right. But I really admired that he stood up for me, stood up to me and stood up for himself. And as the semester went by, that really helped keeping the conversation going in the class. And there was one particular lecture where I was talking about, so light and life, we talk about UV light. And I talk about why we have melanin in our skin to protect our melanocytes from UV light so we don't get melanoma. And then I go into all the postmodernism about critical race theory and various things. And I talk about Jonathan Haidt's idea that universities are here for the search for truth or for social justice. You can have one or the other telos. And I said, my department, actually on our website, my school, says that Cornell was founded on and perpetuates slavery. I wrote to the diversity person and said, I don't believe that this is true. Can you, I want to know what's true or false, fact and fiction, actually using Hannah Arendt's terminology for who's the perfect person to become part of a totalitarian state. And the person wrote back to me and said, let's just get beyond what's fact or fiction, true or false, and talk about how we can make everybody inclusive. And Jonathan Turley picked up on that, a university that's not interested in true or false, fact or fiction. So I brought that up to the class. And he said, well, I said, does anybody believe that we perpetuate slavery? And he said, yeah. We have people in sweatshops that are making like the sneakers or shirts. And I said, Yeah, that's true. I mean, good point. And then I talked about the people coming over the border and sex slavery there. And the class got in a really interesting discussion. And he told me, although he really agrees with the 99.9% of his other professors, if he veers that 0.1%, it's all over. Where me, we can differ by 180%, but he felt comfortable speaking, and we both learned from the conversation.
Interesting.
It's possible, it truly is possible to create a place where people feel free to speak, except for transgender stuff. That's the, if you say anything about that, except to me personally, the bomb will go off.
So that's interesting. So what I'm hearing you say is that your students are not, annoyed with you that you're allowing, let's say, a more right-leaning opinion to be expressed in your classroom. The students are not shouting down that student, or if you disagree with some opinion they have, they're not shouting you down. They're allowing this so the majority of those in your classes are allowing this conversation to happen.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's heartening. So that's a step better than, let's say, Evergreen.
Oh.
But I'm also hearing you say that they're telling you it's a novelty, that their other professors are the ones potentially telling them that that's not allowed, then they self-center. Do you think that then empowers students in those classes who take the professor's side 100% of the time to shout down any potential views that don't?
I don't think it empowers them outside of my class. I hope it has a long-term effect on them. But at Cornell, the pressure is too great to conform.
So you're like an island of heterodoxy right there in there. Okay. Interesting. And so from other schools, I've heard it's more the students than the professors, depending on the school. But it sounds to me like you're saying it's a little of both, or it's more from the professors that are causing the rigidity, or how would you say it? Is it 50-50? Is it, I mean, obviously you're guessing, but I'm just kind of curious.
I think the people that are into social justice, the whole movement, don't amount to more than 20% of any population, except perhaps the administration. The titled administration. I'm not talking about the administrative assistants and all that. So if there were ever a vote, a secret vote, the whole social justice thing would be gone. But people are so afraid that's what's. So I ask my students every year about are they comfortable to speak up or not, and for years it went down in terms of their comfort for speaking up. Last year it actually went up, and that's because they decided they should just tribalize and not even deal with people with different opinions.
That's not necessarily a good development.
No, it's not a good thing. Okay.
So now let's talk about how this came to a head. I think it was the alumni. Am I correct that alumni started seeing this or hearing about it and said this is enough? Or was there a catalyst or a group of events that happened that caused the pressure to bear about a policy at Cornell?
The Cornell Free Speech Alliance started up, and then there was something that was either so small or so big it rallied me and the Cornell Free Speech Alliance to get together. So I take my class to the rare manuscript collection every semester to see those original texts. Mm-hmm. And I had a paperback version of narrative Frederick Douglass' narrative of a slave.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a certain paragraph about being a contented slave. And I wanted to just see it in the first edition that we have in our library that was owned by William Lloyd Garrison. So I went to the library to just read that paragraph in that book. And I noticed that a Lincoln bust that had always been there was gone. This Lincoln bust was sculpted by Vinnie Ream. She was a young, poor girl, and she and Abraham Lincoln had a mutual friend. And she asked the mutual friend, "Do you think you could get Abraham Lincoln to sit for me?" And Abraham Lincoln said, "I'm so homely. Why would you want me to sit for you?" "But because you're young and poor and a female, I will." And it was actually the last living sculpture or anything, last living image of Abraham Lincoln. And Ezra Cornell, who was a friend of Abraham Lincoln's, bought the bust. The full-length sculpture is actually in the Capitol Rotunda, where Abraham Lincoln's holding the Emancipation Proclamation. So here you see his bust, and he's looking down this way, or this way, he's looking towards his right hand, and at the Emancipation Proclamation. It's a beautiful, beautiful bust, and it was gone. So I asked somebody, what happened to the bust of Abraham Lincoln? And that person said, someone complained, and it was gone. So I wrote to the president, I followed up on it, and at this time, the Cornell Free Speech Alliance and I got together. And they had the backing of 6,000 people that could say, there's 6,000 people that think if Abraham Lincoln can be canceled, anybody can be canceled. And a new librarian named Elaine Westbrooks came in, and by having 6,000 alumni that were angry, her first day on the job, she investigated what happened to the bust. And she investigated who's this Randy Wayne guy too. And so I checked out well enough of somebody that loves the library. Actually, I'm one of the few people that want to save universities because they have these libraries that are unbelievable. And I can say that specifically for Cornell University. So she checked out what happened, and she said, well, I'd rather say that somebody was concerned and it was taken away than somebody complained that it was taken away. And I think that's a difference without a distinction, or a distinction without a difference. But my story panned out as opposed to the official story that Cornell put out, that it was getting cleaned.
Cleaned.
Yeah. So I remember being invited on
dirty
TV,
bust.
By heroes that I wanted to talk to. So I said, I don't know if I'm telling the truth or not. So Cornell's putting out one story and I'm putting out the other story. So she confirmed my story. And so that's how that was a good catalyst where everybody that knows, let me say, a number of people know that Abraham Lincoln would not be described as a racist.
No, I mean, certainly not, for the time, absolutely not, by today's standards, of course he would, but
well, even to these standards, who's emancipated more people? Well,
no, I look, no argument there. I'm just saying that things have gotten to that point where, as you pointed out earlier, and Paul did actually, our students are not taught history.
Yeah.
So they have no context. Everything is seen through today. Like if these are 2000s glasses, right? I'm going to put them on, and now I'm going to look at historical figures and go, yeah. Like instead of having the proper context in which to see them and say, wow, that was really progressive of him, right? They're looking at it backwards, and they're taught to see things this way as this sort of zero-sum game. Human beings have always been the same. There's never been any worse time than now. And I call it presentism myself. That's my little name for it, where they don't give people any grace for living in a time that was radically different than now. And that's why what he did was so amazing. But I'm curious, Paul, do you remember the bust from when you were there?
I don't, and I'm thinking of the library. I know, I studied the French Revolution. I was there, and I saw original documents, pamphlets from 1793, and I believe it was in Uris Library in the basement. They had these amazing, but then also Olin. I don't remember exactly the names of the libraries, but there's incredible stuff. But yeah, I mean, part of it is. Exactly. These students are taught to look through a glass darkly at our past. And the real agenda is to show that no substantial progress has been made, that all progress is superficial, and that we're still deeply racism embedded in every sinew of our culture and so on. But then the question is, well, how does progress even happen, right? So like, how did we even get to the point where you can notice this? Certainly people have done things along the way, like Abraham Lincoln, that have made things, through blood and savage consequences, has made things better, and many people paid the price for them. So, yeah, I mean, that is a remarkable thing. And what's actually weird about it to me is that this was not an upswell of students clamoring for this bust to be removed. It's more of a bureaucratic decision, sounds like, where one person was offended, and so they came up with a cover story. And so that's what I see. Is I see a lot of activist bureaucrats, or not necessarily. Maybe it was a faculty member who complained. I don't know who was concerned or whatever it was. But certainly that's what you see. Is you see, with the slightest amount of pressure, the bureaucracy bends over backwards to accommodate that. And the slightest amount of pressure in the other direction, nothing happens, or you get shamed.
Well, I was going to ask that because what kind of pressure? So you have the catalyst, the bust is removed, you have the alumni, and you have 6,000 people who say, okay, no, this is not okay. But how hard was it from that point forward to get this policy written down, to get the president to make a statement, or was it easy? Was it, 6,000 people made phone calls, sent emails, and boom, it was done the next day? I'm curious how that went down.
Oh, no. So you're talking about the year of freedom of expression?
Yeah.
So the Cornell Free Speech Alliance, Paul's one of the terrific alumni. Another one, the K through 12 movement, is Dana Stengel-Plow. That's terrific. There's just people in all walks of life in the group that are terrific. They pressured Martha Pollack, and there was pressure coming on from lots of universities, a lot of alumni Free Speech Alliance. At MIT, they have a very active one that started after Dorian Abbott was canceled from giving a lecture at MIT. So there was something in the wind. And Cornell will never do anything first.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was enough in the wind with the different alumni free speech alliances that what used to be the Woodrow Wilson something, I can't remember, foundation, they changed their name since Woodrow Wilson was such a racist. And they set up this group of a number of universities to have a theme year for free expression. And they're all into DEI. If you look up that foundation, it's all into DEI.
Well, that was going to be my next question is, did it get co-opted?
No, it wasn't co-opted. It was started that way.
Oh, it was started that way. Okay.
Yes. So all the people in the Freedom of Expression Steering Committee were DEI people or people that had no record. There are people on campus, particularly Bill Jacobson in the law school, Barry Strauss, who runs the Freedom of Free Societies Committee, Richard Bensel, who argues in the faculty senate that the Cornell campuses in China should have free speech, that they didn't consult at all, didn't ask to be on the committee or even consult. So it was clear from the beginning that it had nothing to do with free speech. And in fact, what it had to do was freedom from speech. And the best example of this is we have the Martin Luther King Jr. commemorative lecture. So this year, Kimberly Crenshaw, who's a Cornell, look at your face, and I'm going to hold this up.
Oh God, no.
Was the speaker. I hope Coleman Hughes will be the speaker next year. I'm going to do everything in my power to make that happen.
Well, then that brings me to a point that you made to me personally, and you sent me your wonderful Substack piece about how you have the university policy, and then you have you. You have people who are saying, no, we're going to do this. We're going to put pressure. We're going to bring speakers. And am I correct that is more effective as a strategy?
Well, we don't know yet.
Oh, we don't know yet. Okay.
I hope so. So let me tell you who we brought and who we will bring.
Okay.
Let me actually talk about the Cornell official.
We'll go back and do that a little bit. I just found it sort of interesting. Once you said Kimberly Crenshaw, I was like totally deflated. Okay, so I guess we know how it's going. No,
okay, so actually everything is in that category. And you can click onto the Freedom of Expression website and see the videos. Well, they say, well, you should have the freedom to wear what you want to wear, basically. But when it comes to speech, it shouldn't harm anybody. Yeah, do no harm. So, and the people that are oppressed now, that look like the people that were oppressed, let me put it this way. People that wrote the First Amendment don't look like the people that were oppressed now. So this is part of the introductory lecture. Why?
As long as you look like people who were oppressed, 150 or 200 years ago, unless you're actually a female, you can be a man in woman face, and then you're oppressed. Apparently, strangely, how that works, but not if you're an actual woman.
That's right.
That doesn't count, unless of course you're of color or indigenous. This is all Crenshaw. This is not me talking. This is just all the chart.
So I believe that if we have an alternative model for what a theme year of free expression is, slowly and surely we can win the hearts and minds of people. And Ibram X. Kendi, in his How to Be an Anti-Racist, another toxic book, says that he's not interested in changing the hearts and minds of people. He's interested in power and policy change. So believe me, I have no power here. My only ability is to try to change the hearts and minds of people here at Cornell, and hopefully that it will go further. So the first person we brought in for this series, a friend of Paul's, Jody Shaw, and she talked about her case at Smith College, and it was compelling and wonderful. The next person we had was John Tomasi, who's the president of the Heterodox Academy. And he was talking about, it was just after October 7th, and he talked about when a university speaks, what should it say? And talked about the history of the Calvin Report. Our next guest was this semester, and that was Matt Taibbi. And he and Racket News offered to come to any progressive town to see why people aren't standing up to censorship the way they did in the 90s when Tipper Gore was trying to censor music.
I remember.
Our next guest, this coming Tuesday, will be Greg Lukianoff and Ricky Schlott. And they'll be talking about their book, The Canceling of the American Mind. And they have a chapter on K through 12 education, so I'm going to ask them about that, because I think the students have basically been poisoned by their K through 12 education when they get here. And I actually know there's some people trying to change that in terms of science, which I'm very happy about.
Right.
They'll talk about the canceling of the American mind. The next week, Barry Strauss, who's in history and classics here at Cornell, will talk about Alan Bloom's book, the closing of the American mind. And later on, October 11th, we'll have Ted Balaker and Courtney Balaker, who just made the movie available on their Substack, The Coddling of the American Mind. And it's great. I saw it last night. And so we have these 3 American Mind episodes in a series. They'll say, what happened to students now? First of all, relativism came in that said life is meaningless. And then the coddling came in that said be an infant. And then the canceling that came in that if you want to even question whether any of these things are right, you better just shut up because you'll be canceled.
Right.
So that's my goal, to sort of show that progression and that we can get out of it. Interesting enough, I wrote to the director of psychological services, whatever it's called here at Cornell, and said I want to know how big a room I should get. Do you think that your staff would be interested in seeing a showing of this, a screening of the Coddling of the American Mind with a talk back with the director and producer? Crickets. So actually, I looked him up and saw he did stand-up comedy. So I wrote back and said, I don't know if you know this, but Courtney and Ted Balaker made a movie called Can We Take a Joke? About what happened to stand-up comedy, which is streaming on Amazon now. You might want to see that. And Greg Lukianoff, who is one of the executive directors, or the executive director, will be here on March 5th.
Yeah.
Crickets again. So the administration really has no interest in the heterodox thinking that I'm bringing to campus.
Who hires these administrators at the college and university level? Is it the board, right? Board of directors or something?
I don't know.
Board of trustees. I remember looking into the Harvard one when everything was going down with Claudine Gay, and I was surprised to see they had 2 separate boards. First of all, at least Harvard did, and that they're chosen. They sort of replaced, some of them are replaced every year. And then, people have this impression that they sit around and go, we'll hire this person and we'll fire this person. And apparently it doesn't work quite like that. And she was, the president of the university is also the president of that second board. So it's kind of weird. But I think the general public, when we hear about universities and free speech and so forth and administration, captured administration, the first conclusion people come to is we'll get rid of these administrators who are making it hard to learn on this college campus. I mean, to do what the college is designed to do. And what I'm finding out is it's not that simple, that nobody seems to be able to articulate how they're chosen in the first place. What are the criteria? How they're held accountable to not stifle intellectual freedom and expression on the campus just by these kinds of activities. Just, oh, you need a hall? Yeah, I'll get back to you, and never. It could be as simple as that, and you can't do it. You can't solve the problem even on your own because they just gatekeep and get in your way. Or I spoke to a professor here at Davidson who's on a search committee for professors, and everything has to go past the DEI director. So they have to first look at the DEI statement of the prospect. So if the DEI statement that they've written, this applicant, if it does not pass muster with this administrator, the math professor and the math search team for the, new professors cannot even look at their research, can't look at their background, can't look at anything else. That has to pass muster first. And people don't know it. They don't realize like what the hierarchy of power is in these universities. So I'm wondering if you know anything about Cornell's structure and how, here's this person that just crickets you and the students might be missing out.
So I'm in the School of Integrated Plant Science, and we have 4 associate directors, one for teaching, one for research, one for extension. Can you guess which one is in charge of hiring?
What were they again? So you had the research, the first one
Research, teaching, extension.
Extension?
Yeah, because we're a land grant university. It has to do with agriculture, more a land grant act.
Am I wrong? I don't know. Teaching.
What did you say?
I said extension. I'm guessing. I'm literally guessing.
I didn't tell you the 4th one, DEI.
Oh, DEI. So yeah, I would pick DEI. That's what I would.
It's the one that's in charge of promotion, tenure, and hiring.
That seems to me that's the answer right there. So
that's all filtered down right to the every level. It's just inculcated.
So then, what do you think of movements? And there are some movements among some of the wealthiest alumni of some of the Ivies, for example, where they're saying we need to get rid of DEI. I don't know how you would. Short of defunding those positions and saying Cornell University is not going to have a DEI director anymore. Now, obviously, I would love that, but I'm not in charge. Do you think movements like that could be successful, or do you think that DEI directors and DEI departments are here to stay? We're stuck with it, and then we have to find better DEI directors?
All right. So first of all, I think all those alumni should stop donating. So yes, John Lynn here at Cornell spoke up about that. The other thing that's kind of interesting, actually horrible, Cornell, when Paul went to Cornell, there was in the seal, there was a red, white, and blue like shield. And then there was something that represented New York and the Hudson River. And it said Ezra Cornell. In 2008, Cornell changed its seal. And it took out it just has the shape of the seal, this shield. It doesn't have the red, white, and blue anymore. So there's no aspect of America. And there's no aspect of New York.
It's actually just red.
Yeah. Yes. So why did they do that? Now, I don't know, but it's about the time that Cornell decided to become a global university and get in bed with authoritarian countries, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and China. And maybe the whole idea of any person, any study didn't go over very well in those countries. And having the American flag and the New York seal, or part of the New York flag. So the question is, can the alumni money begin to even match the money that's coming in from authoritarian countries?
Of course not.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing on the page, I'm looking at this page right now, freedom of expression theme year. And I'm gonna show the audience this page because you mentioned that it was pretty much all, it wasn't what we would think of as freedom of expression. So you have this little video, but here's what jumps out at me. The free exchange of ideas underpins everything we do as a university, educating new generations of global citizens. There's no such thing as a global citizen. So, challenge personal beliefs, consider new ideas and unfamiliar perspectives, foster discussion around core freedoms for democracy and higher education. Democracy, we also know, is now a code word for other things, collectivism, chiefly amongst them. But so this looks like it has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with what I would have thought freedom of expression would have been, more like along lines of what FIRE stands for, where, there's no speech codes. You're not going to get punished if you have, opinions different from your professor. It's okay to bring speakers to campus who right, left, upside down, but like whatever. We don't shout people down, that sort of thing. That's not what that looks like.
No, Ann Coulter was actually shouted down about this time last year.
And she's an alum?
She's an alum.
Yeah.
And I tried to, the campus code of conduct was taken out of the university assembly's hands and went into some part of the bureaucracy. And so it's, first of all, anybody that's charged with anything has a right to privacy. So I'm not saying I want to know anything about any given person.
Right, sure.
But I have a feeling that they slow walked any public punishment, or will continue to slow walk until those students that shouted her down graduate.
So what I'm hearing then is that short of policy measures that reduce the inflow of foreign money to these universities, because that's a huge amount of money. I mean, that it would be very challenging for alumni, even if every single alumni there is pulls their donations, because that's not the only place they get their money. But it would be very difficult to put enough pressure on them financially to say, ditch the DEI department. So then it sounds like your approach to go straight to the students, the people who are there, like to learn, is probably the best chance. Because if you can't do it from the top, if you've got these gatekeepers and tons of money keeping the gatekeepers in place and so on, then you have to go straight to the source. You have to go straight to the students and appeal to their desire to learn and hear differences of opinion and just change minds. Because to your point, if it's only 20% of the population right now who's driving this fear of speaking out, then all you need to do is get 20%, possibly less, to be courageous enough to push back on them.
So,
right? Or am I too optimistic?
You're in my head.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, for example, Matt Taibbi was the darling of academia when he was the political gonzo journalist for Rolling Stones magazine.
Yeah.
As soon as Elon Musk gave him the Twitter files, he became persona non grata.
Exactly.
So it used to be all department meetings would start out, oh, Trump did this, Trump bad. And then it all changed to Elon Musk bad. And so I talked to the communication department that maybe they would be interested in coming to this event with Matt Taibbi.
Yeah.
No interest. So there was one student that was there that wants to be a journalist. And so Matt had actually won the Izzy Award given by Ithaca College, Park School of Communication. So I wrote to the people that gave him the award, and one was in Europe and one was in New York City and couldn't come to Matt's talk, but they told their students. So some Ithaca College students came, and they said that, Matt Taibbi's at Cornell, let's go. And everybody, Matt Taibbi, isn't that Twitter files guy? No. Yeah. So this one guy came from Ithaca College, and then there was one Cornell student that said, I also didn't get the memo that said I shouldn't come. And he was actually a fascinating person. He asked questions, great questions. He'll be there when Greg Likianoff and Ricky Schlott, another journalist there, to meet them and come to dinner with them afterwards. Right, and right. So if we can work one at a time and people tell their friends, here's what I learned there. Right. I'm hope that's what you can't call that an indoctrination.
Well, no. And I mean, if you go back to the founding of this, so the independence movement in this country, it was done by illegal pamphlets. Yeah. So I think, and I keep saying to people, it doesn't take, we probably won't be able to solve this from a top-down approach, but we do need to reach students. I have I do some private tutoring of college-bound seniors, and I have more hope approaching individuals and even small groups of individuals than I have in, any kind of let's pass a law. I just don't see that working, because even, let's have a policy, and then the policy either gets co-opted or led by the people at the top in the first place, because that's where they are. They're in the position to write the copy for the website, set up the plan, do the whole thing. Next thing you know, freedom of expression on the college campus doesn't mean what you thought it meant, just like diversity doesn't mean what you thought it meant, equity doesn't mean what you thought it meant, and inclusion for sure doesn't. So I love this approach. My next question is, it sounds like right now you have speakers coming who are mostly looking at the habits of mind and the process of.
So let me bring up a few more speakers that we have coming in.
Okay.
So Gad Sad is coming in to give. Him. Oh, me too.
Yeah.
And he's a Cornell alum.
Yeah.
He's going to give a talk on his book, The Parasitic Mind, and a second talk on Jew hatred. And then we have the Steamboat Institute coming in to one of their Campus Liberty Tour debates, where Ilya Shapiro will argue the affirmative. Universities have failed in their mission of free speech and open inquiry. My wife actually says they haven't failed. That's exactly what they wanted to do. Shut down free speech and open inquiry.
I tend to agree with her. It's like mission accomplished. That's what they wanted.
Yeah. And if you're getting money from authoritarian states,
sure,
it all makes sense.
Of course it does.
Randy, can I ask you, have you had any protesters at these speaker sessions?
You're welcome to come if you want to get it.
Sorry to disappoint you, but that part of my life is long gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, I used to be like that, and I gave an interview for somebody, and I said, I wish my father was still alive, because I just want to tell him he was right for all the conversations we had.
I'm the oddball at this table. Yeah. I was at Colby College, graduated in 87, and I was one of the few non-leftists on the campus. I wouldn't go so far as to say I was a conservative, but I was definitely not a leftist. And they're burning Reagan in effigy on the quad. They're doing all kinds of protesting, and I'm rolling my eyes like children. I've always been this way. And so my perception of how things were back then might be slightly different from yours, because I was the person who felt like I couldn't speak in class. I didn't feel like I would open my mouth in the dining hall and just talk about whatever I wanted to talk about. And I remember thinking, how lucky you all are to just walk around with this expectation that everybody agrees with you. Wonder what that's like. I have no idea what that's like, because I was self-censoring before it was, popular. And I knew which teachers, which professors I could be open with and talk to. It didn't really stop me from pursuing what I wanted to pursue in terms of paper topics and so on. But in class, in terms of vocalizing, my questions or whatever, I definitely it was much worse at University of Pennsylvania a few years later. Then it was like, the emperor's naked. Hello, anybody? and I got into it with my School and Society in America professor, who practically called me Hitler. I mean, it was and this again is like 1989. We're not talking recent. This is way before George Floyd was ever thought in anyone's head. But I think my perspective is different because of that, because I wasn't one of my fellow students, even my best friend in the class, met me in the hall. She's like, "What is your problem? What is wrong with you? Like, what are you doing? Why are you asking these questions? Why are you doing this? You're just pissing him off, blah, 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 blah. You're going to fail the class." I'm like, he just said teaching is a political act. And she looked at me like, "Well, isn't it?" And I said, we're talking about K-12 here. These are not adults that we're going to be teaching. I'm looking to teach first grade. What's political about that, And so my perspective is a little different. And then listening to all of this, I just think, okay, I know how it was then. It must be horrendous now. We had G. Gordon Liddy come and speak to us on our campus, and the protest was like minor. In spite of how leftist it was, they still let him speak. They yelled at him in the microphone when they got up there and it was their turn to yell in the microphone. They called him all manner of names. But by today's standards, that was respectful. They waited their turn to scream at him. So it's That said, I've seen individual people turn around. That doesn't mean they change their politics. It doesn't mean, but I've seen them stop being militantly censorious when, like what you did in your class, where you allowed the student to have his view about women in science and do his, you didn't do it. Okay. Do your paper, do your research that way. That they're kind of like, wait, this is allowed. This is cool. I can do this, and they can do their thing. And they suddenly realize it doesn't take very long if you do it right. So my question was going to be, on top of these speakers, have you thought about bringing some speakers who will present specific ideas, not just about how to open your, really do freedom of expression and better habits of mind and thinking, but specific thoughts? Like, for example, I'm thinking of Professor Brad Thompson, who's at Clemson, who wrote America's Revolutionary Mind. So you're talking about the Mind series. And in the book, he talks about the philosophies, or the philosophy really, but the specific philosophers who influenced our founders. And what I loved about the book was that it gives you a completely different perspective on how deeply these people thought about what they were doing and why they were doing it, and what rights are and all this kind of stuff. And he runs the Institute for the Study of Capitalism at Clemson. And I'm thinking of people like that who can come and speak to actual specific ideas that the students can accept or reject, or as, whatever. But once their minds are kind of opened by the Mind series of like, oh, I shouldn't have a parasitic mind, I should have an active mind, then maybe bring in some people who they would never have heard from before, ideas that they probably never entertained, just to see what happens. I mean, is that on the agenda at all? That kind of thing?
So May 1st, Kathleen Stock, who's a philosopher in England, will come. And she'll talk about transgenderism. And as a philosopher, she divides complex things into manageable pieces. So the transgender thing is, everybody's at Cornell, people are so afraid of being called transphobic. But almost every parent I know that has kids in the K through 12 system is petrified about what may or is happening to their kids, but afraid to speak up. So Kathleen Stock, I think, divides things in a beautiful way, separates girls from women, boys from men, athletes in the swimming pool that are women versus born men. And she makes it, I hope, that people will say, okay, I don't care if Deidre McCloskey wants to change from Donald McCloskey when he's 50. I still think he or she, whichever it was at the time, is a great economist. But when it comes to 6-year-olds, keep your hands off them.
Right. And then you think people like Helen Joyce talks about things like, even the idea of consent and the idea of women versus men in terms of punching down, so to speak. Like, you don't see the women who are transitioning wanting to play on the men's sports teams.
Right.
It's kind of going the other way. And we used to understand why, because we accepted the realities of biology and we accepted the strength differential and all these kinds of things, that we're now rewriting science or understanding of science such that we're acting like there's no difference. Nope. I could dig up bones 1,000 years from now and I'm, I wouldn't possibly know. How would I know? And that's just obviously ridiculous. But there are students walking around in K-12 who genuinely believe that because they've been taught that. They've been taught there's literally no difference.
I think too, that's interesting about competition is that the whole value system of competition is now eroded, right? It's participation. Yes. So what they're doing is they're using the fact that participation is the most important thing, not winning. Winning is the most important thing, right? I mean, that's the Greek sensibility. But now we've somehow moved past that. So why do you care if you win or lose, right? Isn't it better to be inclusive? So the moral systems have collided, and there's really, the transgenderism is, I think, just a nexus of different moral systems around
Right.
the importance of winning. And the fact is that if you have men in women's sports, the women, that's not fair. But fairness in winning and losing is not important to them.
Well, the pursuit of excellence goes away too. So I like to think it's not that winning is everything. It's that excellence is that the pursuit of excellence, like the pursuit of truth, the pursuit of beauty. These what used to be universal values that we saw as aspirational goals and so forth, especially in higher education. What set Cornell apart from other colleges? The excellence. I mean, you get to have the most excellent students get to go there. So there's something to strive for. Then once you're there, you want to be, graduate with Latin honors, or you want to graduate at the top of your class, but you're pursuing excellence, not just for yourself, but for your discipline, for your field, these sort of things. And does that mean you won? Like as far as I'm number one in my class or something, I guess, but it also used to accurately represent something called excellence. And same with sports. And we've decimated that by saying participation, we can't even call something excellent anymore, because that will offend the people, that will upset somebody who didn't achieve at the same level. So it's just, you all played, you all participated, it's all equal. And I'm obviously concerned about what that's going to result, what the results will be in terms of knowledge, especially in science, math, engineering, all the things that kind of keep civilization humming. I'm a little concerned when we start changing the metrics that we use to evaluate people. But the reason I asked about the ideas is that I'm noticing when the students are not well educated at K-12, and by well educated, I don't just mean they don't read well, they don't understand math and science. They're not exposed to as broad a base of knowledge. The knowledge-based curriculum went away in about 1983. And we replaced it with that standards-based, which is just dreadful. And so now they're leaving high school with a fraction, and I'm talking a thimbleful of core knowledge relative to where even I left high school. And already my prep school experience was less than the people a decade before, and so on and so forth. So I think colleges and universities may need to, and especially when you're bringing the speaker series, I think I would encourage some knowledge, bringing in experts to talk about topics that they're not going to hear about unless they choose it in a class, so that they can broaden their horizons even further to feed the free speech idea, the philosophy, history, even arts, just perspectives that they don't get through this tiny little filter of social justice.
You're absolutely right. Some things we're working on. I'm talking with Carol Hooven about coming, and she can talk very much about her book T. And I've tried to. Daryl Davis is another hero of mine.
Oh yeah.
Work with FAIR to bring him for about 2 years, and I think it's going to happen this next fall.
Right.
And to tell his story, to share his music. And as he says, when you're talking to somebody, you're not fighting with them.
That's right.
So it's he has just an incredible story to tell. We're talking to Jim Torr, who's a chemist at Rice University. And he builds, organic chemist, he builds all these huge macromolecules that look like cars and various things. And it's incredible what he can do. And he argues that with just lightning or temperature, you can't build these molecules to form life. And so the whole idea of the origin of life, we'd like to have him come in and talk about that. And that's really interesting, because that leads to, what is the function of a university, as Jonathan Haidt said, the search for truth or something else? And so typically in science, we have a couple stories that really have some room to look at. For example, origin of life. there's some room to talk about different, let me just say God or not God. And in fact, in that Light and Life class, we talk about that. I bring in a rug and a broom. It's in my office back there. The contradictions that we sweep under the rug. So, for example, if the first law of thermodynamics is fundamental, you can't create something from nothing. You can transform it. The only person that can create something is the creator. And that James Joule wrote that right into the first law of thermodynamics. The alternative is Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, where you can get something from nothing for a certain amount of time. So those two laws can't work. They're contradictory. Only one can be fundamental. So I let my students choose. You can choose what you want. Actually, I give them an empty tray, and I ask them all to create a universe. I give them 5 minutes. I know I should give them 6 days, but so they're looking at that, and I said, well, what, anybody do it? Raise your hand when you're done. And nobody does. They all laugh and say, well, what if we did this every day for a week? Do you think somebody would create a universe? No. And then what if 7 billion people in the world all did this experiment at the same time? Or every day for a week or a month? You think we'd create a universe? No. So we kind of get an idea of, can matter create itself? Is the Heisenberg uncertainty principle fundamental? Or the first law of thermodynamics fundamental? So, I can't remember. Oh, I know. So I was going to say, James Tour is a chemist that asks these kind of questions. Is it easy just to create life? Or does it actually take a miracle?
Right.
And then once you admit it's a miracle, you could say it's a miracle with God or without God. And each person's on equal footing.
Exactly.
I've always thought life organic beings, they're anti-entropic, right? So there has to be something other than entropy creating complexity that can replicate itself at the level of a living thing.
But just to be able to have these conversations and do this experiment with the students in and of itself is something. Like I'm so thrilled. Like this is like a white pill show for me because what you're talking about, it just gives me a lot of hope. Say we're going to bring these speakers and we're going to do these things, and I do what I do because I have a lot of faith in young people, and I see kids, and I just see hope for the future. Every kid is like a hope that we can make things better, and I don't think that changes just because they're adults and got to college. I think there's still time. But I'm also thinking subversively that maybe we need to take a page out of the book of the people who kind of did this in the first place. Well, they didn't some of them came in as professors, as I said, at the ed school level, and they taught the teachers, and the teachers went out. But they didn't just land in the science department, a postmodernist, and said, everything's relative. Let's just do this kind of science. Instead, they would bring speakers to campus, and the wonderful liberal free speech campus is like, oh, you can bring speakers to speak about crazy things. You speak about whatever. And by bringing all kinds of, Kimberly Crenshaw type people over and over the years from the 60s and on, gradually the kids' minds are like, oh, this is great. And they put pressure on the schools by where they're going to school and what kind of professors' classes they're taking. And, oh, they agree with that speaker, and they make me read the book of that speaker, and that they were the person who brought the speaker. That the students then started demanding it. Then the professors come in, and it kind of went like that. You could have the same effect. So you bring in the speakers, use all the alumni money. Don't send the money directly to the school to be spent by the DEI director hiring people. Send it to the Free Speech Alliance organizations to bring the speakers and the little, having them in halls around the college and so on and so forth. Bring the kids, and then send them back into the classroom. I mean, that's my subversive little mind.
I think there's so much potential in what you're doing, Randy. If you can incubate a real university within the false university.
I agree.
Of which you are the sole administrator and judge, right? Because
I love this idea.
Or with the Free Speech Alliance, and then.
So this is actually, I have to say something. The Free Speech Alliance gives us no money for this. This is all done from the Heterodox Academy Campus Community.
No, I'm saying they should.
We have a donate button if anybody does want to help.
Yeah, I'm saying I'll make sure the links. I think the link is in the description, but I'm saying that these alumni organizations, wherever they are, if they're not, Free Speech Alliance of it, whatever they brand themselves at these schools, and if they're organizing themselves for the purpose of pushing back against DEI, and if you have the big billionaires who are saying, I'm not going to donate anymore until you get rid of DEI, I want to say to them, no, do donate, but donate to Randy, or donate to the people who are bringing speakers, or you do it. If you don't want to put it through an organization, you were going to otherwise give $1 million, put $1 million into this speaker series and let the people who are trying to have a real heterodoxy of, ideas come to these college campuses, go on tour and make a whole tour out of it, where the colleges, what is their excuse to say no? I mean, after a while, you've got alumni funded, alumni organized, alumni driven, a thing that has all different kinds of speakers. It's not conservative, it's not heritage that's doing it, right? It's alumni of the schools. I would love to see how they say no. Our students can't participate in this. Good luck. They're adults. They can go wherever they want.
They say that to me.
Exactly.
Let them try.
Exactly. And then, like Paul said, you establish a real university, a lyceum right there on the campus in Ithaca, and there's nothing they can do about it because free speech.
So that's why I'm working particularly hard this year, because it just shows that. Do you know Till Eulenspiegel, the Greek, the German folklore? He went around with an owl and a mirror and just showed the hypocrisy of what was going on. Since I teach light and life, I talk about reflection, and I bring up Eulenspiegel. And
I have a little mirrored owl on my shelf over there.
Perfect.
Owls are one of my favorites. My Twitter handle or X handle is Owl of Athena.
So, perfect.
Yeah.
I just want to really show that there's this way of looking at freedom of expression, and then there's this way of looking at freedom of expression. And I'm hoping parents take notice when they decide where to send their kid and their money. And
very important.
Yeah. And so, like I said, I hope, particularly because the library is so wonderful.
Yeah.
And Paul, we actually have the largest Lavoisier collection outside of France, so I can show my students Lavoisier's own books, his own copy of Newton, and
wow,
or the copper plates that Madame Lavoisier made for his books. It's just incredible. It's worth saving.
No, I agree. A lot of people are saying, don't hire college graduates anymore. And I mean, I will say that if you're talking about hiring people who majored in, social science or humanities and so on, I would definitely think twice about how you evaluate what they know. But I want to save the universities. I mean, that's one of the things that made the country a destination for people all over the world. Was this is where you would go. Parents in countries all over the world would save up and they would work hard so their kids could go to university in the United States. We had, the best. And I think what's happening is sort of tragic. I do have a question from our audience. Dr. Lamoureux asks to Deb and guests, it is said that the structure and content of woke ideology appears to be a primordial secular and civic religion. From your experience, do you agree with this?
Yes. I mean, what I've noticed with the students that I've taught in my high school, the most susceptible students are the morally rootless ones. And what I mean by morally rootless is that they are either divorced from the tradition, some moral tradition, they're secularized, they don't have parents that have laid down successfully values that they've internalized. And so when you have the moral certainty that wokeness gives you, to be a little bit unspecific, but it gives you a moral certainty and it gives you a platform for how to be a good person, because we all need to be good people. So it provides you with this very ersatz moral language, which you can use as a weapon because you've also condemned yourself. So you condemn yourself. If you remember the oppressor class, you can join in the fun as long as you condemn yourself. Then you can
Join in the fun.
Which
No,
is, Camus' The Fall is great about that. It's the judge penitent who is allowed to criticize others because they are the worst offender. This is Robin DiAngelo's shtick. She is, I am the greatest racist of all, therefore I have the ability to judge you.
right. And we talk on my channel, I talk quite a bit about the Erickson's stages. And when kids come into school, they're in the stage where their prime directive, so to speak, in Star Trek terms, is how do I be good? So that's like what kids up to about the age of 10, 12 or so, how do I be good? And then when they enter middle school, their prime directive is, who am I? What's my identity? How do I define myself as separate from my family, from my parents? And I've seen professional development videos by people who are pushing social justice explicitly say why they are targeting, as Randy pointed out, the gender discussion as 6-year-olds. Well, to be a good person means to be queer. And, queer just meaning the antithesis of everything normative is somehow good as opposed to bad and repressive. And then when you enter middle school, they want to get them because we've got to help them define those identities and maybe the good kind of the kind of person who you are, the kind of person who fill in the blank, social justice. And then by the time they get to college, if they didn't have their parents teaching them how to be good and how to figure out who they are in, like in competition with the school's message, by the time they get to college, it's been done. And whatever they picked is similar to a religion, is similar to a faith. Like if you challenge it, you're challenging their identity. You're challenging like who I am, not just a belief I have, but who I am.
They have to be a bad person to listen to you. And
that's
to
right.
Even hypothetically in a displaced way, like to hold in abeyance, to hold in a bracketed fashion,
right.
Some heresy would be a pollution, would be a moral pollution for them. And so, that's how it works.
And they would be the least likely probably to attend some of the talks of the speakers because it does directly challenge who they are. But I also believe, as Randy pointed out, that those are the minority of the minority. So they're very loud, they're obnoxious, but I still think they're a minority of that other minority who are not necessarily zealous, but it's like trendy, it's fashionable, this is what everybody believes, and I'll do it, yeah, sure, whatever. The 80% are like, I'm not rocking the boat, just gonna go with whatever. And maybe let's say 5% of that 20% are zealots, like absolute captured brains, or the parasitic mind is in full force there. So anything we didn't cover about this? So what would you say as we approach a year from their policy? What's your verdict about a college-based declaration of we are going to do this? Like, what should parents know? What should we be thinking about these? From the Cornell example, or just in general, your thoughts on these?
I want to just add to this last topic for a second.
Sure, please do.
That with their content poor K through 12 education, even if they disagree with their parents' values at some time, particularly as teenagers and all, they have enough self-confidence, real self-confidence, because they have an education, a real education, that they can argue, you're wrong because of this. And maybe it's limited, and maybe when they get to be my age, you realize that, no, your parents were right, you were right. But you have a certain self-confidence in your own personhood. And they're being robbed of that by having such a content-poor education. So they become essentially fodder for any movement.
Very true.
Well, content and knowledge has been offloaded into the search algorithm. So all you need is confidence that you can find what you need to prove what you already know. Whether it's even, on Google, so it's curated in a way which is going to allow you to present an argument. You don't even have to know the argument yet. It's all offloaded onto this this tech platform.
But what I'm noticing is they don't even know how to ask questions.
Yes.
So even if you have this is what I tell parents too, even those who are like, well, they'll just look on, they'll use Google ChatGPT. You do understand they don't know how to formulate a question to even ask the AI, right? Because you have to have a base of knowledge from which to form your question. You can only form questions from a vocabulary. If your vocabulary is limited, the number of questions you can ask is limited. So it all builds. And I've tried through my channel also to educate people about how people learn, like how little humans learn things.
Well, you ask
a
question which has a foregone conclusion, right? Why is Trump bad? Right.
Right.
So like the question is simply instrumental to get to the argument.
Oh, that for sure. But when they're studying or when they're learning, I did an interview today with David Cray, and one of the jobs that he had years ago, right after the Soviet Union sort of collapsed, is he was over there talking to students or doing some teaching and teaching students who had come out of this world, and they were supposed to write essays, and they said, well, tell us what to write about. And he said, well, no, you can choose whatever essay topic you want. And they said, well, no, we can't, because we need you to tell us what essay topic so we can write the essay that you want us to write, because otherwise we might get in trouble. They're so used to being told what to do. And I have students now who will say, well, these are the materials we're allowed to use, and these are the questions we're allowed to answer. And this is already, there are high school students doing this. And when I ask them, well, what question would you ask about the book? What would you want to write about? If it were up to you, you read the book, correct? Mm-hmm. So what would you like to write? I don't know. I want to know what the teacher wants me to write about. I want to get an A, so I want to write what they want me to write about. They couldn't even, I said, forget it. Forget the grade. Just forget. We're not talking about that. I'm asking you, what are you curious about this story? And they just stare blankly at you like, I don't know, nothing.
I think it's funny because I think this is sort of a problem that's been going on for a long time. Like this is a problem that goes like if your understanding of reality is subordinate to status and instrumental to advancing your career or advancing your and the grades are a measure of that or whatever, well then, the truth and wisdom are, dragged through the street, right? So you constantly, there's a new form of this now, but it's always been this way to some degree. And the people who are really interested in the truth in any society are actually very slim. Okay, like these are people who would choose the truth over status or what people wanted to hear. And so those are the people that would go to the universities to learn what the truth is because they value the truth. But as college has democratized and now everybody goes to college, now it's all instrumental and status driven and so on. And in fact, there was an intermediate stage where novelty was very important, right? Publish or perish. So the truth was already, a bastard when professors would, in the humanities particularly, I know there's a reason to actually have things in science that are new, but where you had to create some crazy new idea because that would make your career and it was interesting and it was sexy. So postmodernism in the 80s thrived on the sexiness of the ideas. And it was no longer, that was when we sort of humanities lost their way, in its latest incarnation, in my view.
It's, anyway.
Oh, Deb, can I, when you talked about questioning, you reminded me of something. When I went to this camp in Interlaken, and we were lucky enough to have 3 brothers that came from Meridian, Mississippi, and had gone to the Freedom School.
Was this one in New Hampshire?
Yeah.
I went there.
You did?
I did.
Well, did Sue Herman and
I did. Well, I went there for one summer. This would have been in 1978-ish.
Well, it was only boys when I went. It was Interlaken International Camp for Boys.
Yeah, no. So no, I went there in the 70s and for 1 year. I had a lot of fun. But
my mother thinks it had the most effect on me of anything. Yeah. And so Len Ray, taught us about civil rights in a way that I never would have had a kind of knowledge that I had. So I knew about the Freedom School, and I found SNCC's philosophy. So in my syllabus, it says, my teaching philosophy is in line with that used in the Freedom Schools of Mississippi. And they published it as Notes on Teaching in Mississippi, written by the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And it began this way. This is the situation. You will be teaching young people who lived in Mississippi all their lives. That means they have been deprived of a decent education from the first grade through high school. It means that they have been denied free expression and free thought. Most of all, it means they have been denied the right to question. The purpose of the freedom, I'm going to cry. The purpose of the freedom schools is to help them begin to question. And if that doesn't sound like academia today.
It is.
Yeah. So I think DEI is just like 1964 Mississippi. It's just you're reversing the roles.
100%. That is exactly, there's even a little, there's a comedian who did a video. Oh no, I can't remember his name. Maybe you've seen it, Paul, where he and another guy are dressed up and they're both wearing matching blue shirts. And one says white supremacy and one says like critical race theory or something, like that.
Oh yeah, the woke racists.
Yeah, and they're both like, we should disagree, but we agree on everything, whatever. And they're literally agreeing with each other's ideas until they get to the one where he talks about where they talk about something to do with religion or something, and he goes, well, I put a little hat on the head, and then we'll be against it too. So where the white supremacist guy was, or the KKK guy was against the Jews, but other than that, they agreed on everything. But I now we see after October 7th that they even agree on that. So it's the same. I love that. That's such a great way to look at it. And I've thought for a while now that the revolution's over. So in other words, the Marxist revolution, we're the counter-revolutionaries now. We're the ones. We're the civil rights fighters. We're the counter-revolutionaries. I think it's helpful to frame it that way because instead of feeling like you're fighting something, you're building something, right? They happened, but they're going to, as things happen, they're going to become yesterday's news at some point if we do it right, if we present things right. I think being reactionary is a bad idea. I think coming up with bans is probably a bad idea because that's, creates that kind of reaction action thing. I think it's better to show these students what they've not been shown. If there's one thing I've noticed about young people is they don't like that. They don't like discovering that somebody hid a truth from them. They don't like feeling like somebody kept them in the dark or deprived them of something that was rightfully theirs. So if you can convey to them, this is your birthright is the pursuit of knowledge. And here, I just want to give it to you. I just want to share this with you so you can pursue your dreams and your life, whatever. I think that message is much better than you can't say this and you can't say that on the other side. It's like, that's what they do. Why do we want to do that? I'll tell a
story about my students at the school I teach at now. I teach at a charter school in the Bronx. And these, blissfully, we have no DEI, but we're very diverse because all our students are Black and brown. So some of the students, approached me the other day and they said, Mr. Rossi, we have a question to ask you. We're really, they were very shy and worried. And they said, how many genders are there? I said, there are 2 genders. And they erupted in applause. These were all boys, of course.
Oh, I love it.
This is the kind of thing they're whispering it because they don't want to know, but they want to know what I think. And they think that, what I think matters. Yeah. But that's the kind of thing that is subversive, I think, and that when children, they want to know, they're very desperate to know what adults think, and they want to know what's really true.
That's right.
And so they ask these questions, and it's a great opportunity.
Absolutely.
I think they have a sense of truth, a real sense of truth, and
well, they smell bullshit a mile away.
Right. Exactly. And I think there, one of the things I've told my audience for a while now is don't think it's perfectly fine that your child doesn't buy into the ideas pushed at school, they could become very cynical, very mistrustful of adults, and they don't have anything to replace that with. So there's a void. And that can leave you feeling very anxious and frustrated and bitter, because that's their childhood they're wasting hearing things that don't mean anything to them, that they don't agree with. So you're still, even if you inoculate them at home to the worst of the worst ideas, they're not likely to go in and go, okay, I'm a girl now, whatever. They're still sitting there going, why am I flipping here all day? What is the point of any of this? I just have to sit here and like pretend to, just killing time. Being held captive somewhere where you're essentially killing time and checking boxes and pleasing people just to get through the day is poison for the soul. That is just not, to grow up like that is like putting your child in prison all day, I feel. And so I try to, without being too dark, tell parents like, that's only half the battle, is inoculating against the other ideas. Now you've got to feed their curiosity. You've got to keep that alive. You got to keep their belief in the future going. And that not all adults are like that. Not all adults just want, shut up and listen to what I'm telling you. And wasn't that always the complaint? Like John Taylor Gatto said that. Wasn't the complaint of traditional school by progressives? That it's too much, sage on the stage and I'm lecturing at you and whatever. Okay, super. You put it in the Chromebook, but it's the same thing. All you did was flip it around the other way, stick it in a Chromebook, data mine the heck out of the kids while you're doing it, but it's essentially the same regurgitate. No improvement as far as I'm concerned. So.
The theme song for my class is Bob Marley's Redemption song with the lines, emancipate yourself from mental slavery.
Yes.
None but yourself can free your minds. And actually, I want to say that Playing for Change has a version that they did of that song with people from all over the world. It's just wonderful.
I think that's great. So as I was saying before, anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to say to wrap up? Like I said, this has been a pleasure for me. I feel like I feel better knowing that people like Randy are out there doing what you're doing, both in your science classroom, but also what you're doing for freedom of expression. I'm just knowing how you run your science classroom is music to my ears. I'm not a scientist, but I have a deep appreciation for that and how important it's going to be as we move forward in human history. So I'm glad to hear that somebody's still teaching it.
Yeah, I want to audit your class, Randy.
Seriously.
If I ever move back to Ithaca, I'm going to do that.
And I owe you a cup of coffee as soon as you.
Oh yeah, great. Temple of Zeus. Is Temple of Zeus still around?
Yes.
Okay, good.
So what did we miss, Randy?
Actually, this is, you might have to stop me if I get too long, but you were talking about people don't like to know they weren't told the whole story.
Yes.
So I asked my students one day before I'm going to lecture on this, does anybody know the name Wilberforce?
Yes.
So nobody does know it. I said, okay.
Oh, yeah, yes, the class. I was
Then I give my lecture. The title of the lecture is Charles Darwin, Samuel Wilberforce, and How We See the Color of Ants. And the first thing I do is I talk about, I tell a speech from John F. Kennedy talking about the voice of America and search for truth. I play Johnny Cash singing, the little boy of youth sings, asks what is truth. I play Jack Nicholson saying, you can't handle the truth. Just a number of things about the truth. And then I say, have you ever heard anybody in your schooling say, we want to know the truth? And I say, no. Okay. So then I read them a lot of Samuel Wilberforce's review of Darwin's Origin of Species, written in 1860. So he starts out with some beautiful stories, which quotes Darwin. I won't go into. And then he gets to a very funny story. It's about the slave-making instinct of ants. And no matter what color the master ants are, the slaves are always black. So this is 1860, when Great Britain is in Africa and Australia and New Zealand and various places. And Darwin is trying to replace psychology with biology. So if we're developed from animals with slave-making instincts, maybe that's something that we should have. So this whole thing becomes just so interesting to them. And then I asked them, so Wilberforce actually, he taxed the fossil record that Darwin relied on, and the fact that we've never seen a new species come up. And actually, Wilberforce's review is apt today. And Darwin actually wrote to his friend and said, hey, he found all my weak points.
Right.
And so then I asked them, so why would this matter to Wilberforce, since they had never heard any Wilberforce name? So I tell them that his father was William Wilberforce, who spent his life in Parliament trying to get 2 bills passed, one to stop the slave trade and one to abolish slavery. Mm-hmm. And that William Wilberforce was kind of like just played around in Parliament, but he decided he should do something meaningful. And he went to see John Newton. I asked him, do you know John Newton's name? No. I said, well, he was a captain of a slave ship, either a very good one or a very bad one, depending on your perspective. Mm-hmm. And one day he realized that all people are created in God's image. And if that's true, there shouldn't be slavery. So he quit being a slave trader and went and worked in the church and wrote some hymns. One of those hymns was Amazing Grace, about his own life.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, and I have actually John Newton's complete works there behind the computer, and I take it out and I have a student read just that particular hymn. And the silence, the unbelief about a part of the world that they didn't know, where now science and religion are like on a different footing than they've ever thought about before. Right. And it was A.D. White here that wrote The Warfare Between Science and Theology, where he said it was Wilberforce that lost a debate that never actually happened to T.H. Huxley, and that's when science took over religion. And it's just...
so the students, I bet, were like, they didn't know any of this, and they probably thought it was fascinating.
Completely.
That's amazing. So I do have, I wanted to quickly get this. We have an alum who is with us, Patrick LaBelle, as a physicist and alum from Cornell. Thank you for the stream. And he asks, when will the conference, I think he's talking about the speakers coming. I might drive and visit again. He's in Canada, I believe.
Well, please do come and let's have lunch together.
Yeah.
And my email is row1, ROW1 at cornell.edu.
Yep.
So if you email me, I'll send you the list of people that are coming. And now I should say that I have a colleague, Peter Davies, who really deserves that email because his daughter, Karen, has won so many gold medals in the Olympics for rowing that she's really row 1.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. I love this story. These are the kind of professors, like when I went to college and I'd have professors that would do stuff like this. I was like, this is what makes you never want to leave. This is what you sit there and this is why school is fun, And I homeschooled my kids in their early grades, and I remember it so perfectly that the kids want to learn. They are hardwired to learn. And yes, I think it goes dormant in the schools that we have now because of the way that we teach. But I do think it can be reignited. And I think it can be reignited by professors like you and approaches like this, and bringing exciting, interesting speakers who challenge them, really challenge them. Like, think for yourself and think differently. This is a point of view you haven't heard before, not just the same word salad coming out of a person wearing a different costume. That's what I see now with a lot of the DEI. We're having a speaker. And it's like, no, you're speaking the identical ideas. I've watched so many of these videos. I'm brain dead. And I'm listening like, that is the same thing that Kimberly Crenshaw said, that this one said, that Kendi said, that it's the same thing. It's just coming out of a different package. And I think that students are hungry for actually interesting stories and different points of view that truly are different, not the same social justice, I was oppressed and now we need to fix the world message. That's just my point of view. So, I think you guys are doing amazing things. And Paul, what you're doing in your school, I hope you'll come back and talk to us about how that's going separately.
Oh yeah, definitely. Lots to say.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll be very interesting. So Randy, thank you.
Well, thank you for having this podcast. Thank you for having me on, but thank you for having this podcast. And
there will be more. There will be more. As I want updates. I want you to come back. I want you to tell, this is how it went. This is where, I think it'd be great. And I will, I'm going to stay in touch with you because I want to make sure also to broadcast what's going on at Cornell in terms of if you record these gatherings, which I hope that you do. We need to get those out and make sure that people have access to them beyond the Cornell campus, all the alumni, because then that'll motivate the alumni to donate to Randy so that Randy can bring more speakers. You see how this works?
Well, thank you.
The wheels are turning.
Actually, the people that have given to me, one alumnus, Art Hershey, says, I never give to these kind of people asking me for these little things. But I'll trust you. This is to bring Jody Shaw in. Yeah. Then he heard Jody Shaw and said, what a wonderful person. And actually they started an email correspondence. Yeah. And
that's how this gets fixed. I'm convinced this gets fixed through relationships. Through relationships between people, and then sharing information, and then spreading that out to more people from the ground up, and then it will come back down again. But we have to do that and just stay on it. So use me however I can help. I'm here for you. And I'm so very grateful to the audience. Thank you for joining us so very much. And please follow, go get in touch with Randy. The information is below. You can follow Paul Rossi. You can check out Terra Firma. And we'll be back again with another show another time. So thanks, everybody. And I hope everybody has a great rest of the week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Paul. It's great to be on with you.
Yeah, great to see you.